So, alright, so Exodus 1, for those of you who have gone through Exodus or have never read fully through Exodus, you're going to be amazed at some of the things we're going to talk about. We really get to see God and what God has to say. Okay, so Genesis, we kind of delved into God's relationship with humanity and some of these different families and different things like that. Exodus is going to be a lot of God speaking. So you're going to get to hear God's voice. You're going to get to hear God's heart, what he wants, his desire. So that's the crux of Exodus, is we're really going to hear from God. Okay? So before we dive into chapter 1, we need to do just a little bit of a rewind. So last year when we went through Exodus, we left off with this big family, right? So we had Jacob, who was called Israel, right? Okay, same guy, but two different names. He had 12 sons.
Wait, who? Jacob. What was
Jacob,
the other name?
Israel.
Israel, that's right. Okay.
God calls him Israel, same guy, two names. So he's got 12 sons. They get wives, they have children, right? So we're talking about 70-ish people who go down into Egypt, right?
Do you know why God calls him Israel?
Because Israel is the nation that he wanted to call him. So he was basically taking Jacob and saying, Jacob, you're no longer a deceiver. I'm going to make you into a great nation. Because Jacob actually means deceiver. Means heel grabber, deceiver. And Israel is great nation. So I'm going to turn you into a great nation.
Wow.
Yep.
Okay.
Hold on, was it that's the one that deceived his father?
Yes.
Esau.
And his brother.
And his brother
And his,
okay.
all
okay,
that.
okay.
Yeah, that's Jacob.
Same one.
Same guy.
That is Israel.
That's Israel. That's Jacob. Yes. All right. So he's. Why did him and his family have to go down into Egypt?
Family.
There was a huge famine. Okay, huge famine. They had to go down into Egypt. There's about 70 of them, and God told Jacob to go to Egypt. Okay, it was God who led them down into Egypt, and he promised to be with them, and he promised to bring them back. So this was only supposed to be a temporary journey. Okay, so at the end of Genesis, Jacob blesses his sons, and he dies, and he's buried where they are in Canaan. Okay, his son Joseph. Remember, Joseph is famous for his coat of many colors, his dreams, being in prison. He was sold, became a slave. He ends up in jail, and then he becomes second in command of all of Egypt, right?
And then
So-
his brothers come.
And his brothers kept. We remember that whole story, right? Okay. So before Joseph dies at the end of Genesis, what does he tell his family he wants done with his bones?
To take him back home.
Take them back home. When you go home, bring my bones with you. Okay? So he's mummified and he's placed in a sarcophagus there as a witness. Hey, when we go back, take me with you. Okay? So a few hundred years have passed, and poor Joseph is still sitting there waiting. Okay? So this is where Exodus opens. Same family, same God, but completely different
You
circumstances.
said 200 years?
Couple hundred, there's some calculation things that we have to deal with. Most people say they were in Egypt for 430 years, but it seems like the 430 is actually from Isaac to when they leave in Exodus, so they would probably have been about Egypt between 200 and 300 years. So there's some leeway there with years, and years are really hard when we get that far back, but a couple hundred years at least, okay? So we end Genesis with hope, right? We're going down to Egypt. It's just supposed to be a temporary vacation, right? We're going to take that. Yeah. We're going to go to Egypt, right? And then when we get to Exodus, we're like, what happened? It's been a couple hundred years, and now we've gotten this huge population explosion from the 70 people, but we're still stuck in Egypt.
So what I find weird, I don't know if I find it weird, it just, the Egyptians, we were all from like the same
Mm-hmm.
family,
Same family knows
group,
family. Mm-hmm.
you know, and being so far away, how different and how
Mhm.
far away they drifted from
Yes.
one another, that they would do what they did to their family member, basically.
Yeah. So when you get time removed, you forget. And that's one of the things that we're going to talk about in this very first chapter. So I'm glad you brought that up. Okay, so let's start reading in verse 1. So we're Exodus 1, verse 1. We're going to read the first 7 verses. These are the names of the sons of Israel, Jacob, who came to Egypt with Jacob, each one with his household. Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, and Benjamin, Dan and Naphtali, Gad and Asher. All the descendants of Jacob were 70 persons. Joseph was already in Egypt. Then Joseph died, and all his brothers, and all that generation. But the people of Israel were fruitful and increased greatly. They multiplied and they grew exceedingly strong, so that the land was filled with them. Okay, so Exodus gives you a little recap of Genesis. We're still talking about the same family, okay? And all of their generation has now passed away. So we have now their descendants, a couple of generations of their descendants, okay? So something extraordinary has happened. These people have multiplied dramatically. They're like rabbits, okay? We've gone from 70 people to some estimates of 2 million people.
Were they the first 70 people in Egypt, or were there already Egyptians there?
There were already Egyptians there. We're talking about the Israeli people.
Okay.
The
So the
group of
Israelis
70.
partnered, paired up?
No,
No.
they're completely separate.
That was incest?
That was all the 70 people of one family. Yes.
No, I was thinking it, you said it.
Yeah.
Just checking.
It is what it is.
We have a small gene pool of 70 people.
And those
we're
70 people was
2 million. All
Populating.
intertwined. Yes.
Okay.
Notice she said rabbits.
Nowadays.
Rabbits. Yes. So we're going to talk about why in this chapter for sure. Okay? All right. So they have
That's why I
expanded to around 2 million people.
Out of 70.
Out of 70.
They start young. They start very young.
They start very young.
I'd say they weren't waiting 20.
See, this is why we study the Bible, right?
And they're all
So-
cousins.
So blown away. Okay.
What did you say, Lauren?
We said
They're all cousins. And they're all
And
cousins.
they're all cousins. They're all related, okay?
Yeah, Lauren, first cousins.
Except for the wives, the original
Yes.
wives. Okay. All right. So verse 70.
Verse what?
Verse 7. Verse 7. It trips over itself with this blessing language. We have fruitful. We have increased greatly. We have multiplied, exceedingly strong. The land was filled with them. So you get that there's a bunch of people, okay? But it goes back to what God told Adam and Eve and Noah and Abraham. They want to be fruitful. They want to multiply. They want to fill. These 70 people took that as a command, okay? They did what the Lord said.
They obeyed at least in one thing.
They
Yes,
abundantly
they
did what
excelled
you said.
in that command, okay? So they fulfilled the one command that God gave them, okay? God, meanwhile, was keeping his promise in the most unlikely place through the most unlikely of circumstances. They did not multiply because they were in ideal conditions. They weren't. They multiplied because God said that they would, and they did, okay? So God kept his promise by multiplying Egypt, but not in the promised land, not where they were supposed to be thriving, okay? He put them under oppression, far from what they had expected, okay? So verse 8, now there arose a new king over Egypt who did not know Joseph. And he said to his people, behold, the people of Israel are too many and too mighty for us. Come, let us deal shrewdly with them, lest they multiply. And if war breaks out, they join our enemies and fight against us, and escape from the land. Therefore, they sent taskmasters over them to afflict them with heavy burdens. They built for Pharaoh storehouses, pitmen and Ramses. But the more they were oppressed, the more they multiplied, and the more they
They had
spread
nothing to do.
abroad. They have nothing better to
Nothing
do.
to know.
Working.
Working and produce.
I'm trying to
That was your day.
words.
The Egyptians were in dread of the people of Israel, so they ruthlessly made the people of Israel work as slaves and made their lives bitter with service in mortar and brick, and in all kinds of work in the field. And in all their work, they ruthlessly made them work as slaves. Okay? So this were not ideal conditions for Egypt, for Israel. So we have a new Pharaoh who rises to power. Okay? And there's one line that changes everything. This guy does not know Joseph. He doesn't know the history. He doesn't know the story. He doesn't know why the Israelites are there. Now, if this guy is king over Egypt, do you think he knows?
Yeah,
probably knows.
He
has to
knows. This is relationship language. He did not have a relationship with Joseph, as the Pharaoh before him did. Okay? So he knows the history, but he doesn't know these people. Okay? They are now separate and distinct from him. Okay?
Now, is that in part because they settled further away from the main?
Correct. Yes. So they are keeping distinct, and we're going to talk about that too, of why they kept distinct from the Egyptians. Okay? It might surprise you.
So the Israelites kept themselves separate from the Egyptians.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
We're going to talk about that in just a second.
Okay.
So this Pharaoh did not know Joseph, did not know what God had done with this family, but more likely he was choosing to ignore everything that had happened, okay? And what's interesting is we're not given the name of this Pharaoh. We're just told that he's king. Pharaoh just means king. It's a title, okay? Like our president, that's not our president's first name, right? Okay, so Pharaoh is his title, but we don't know his name, okay? And it's not just this Pharaoh. Through the rest of Exodus, we're actually going to meet several pharaohs, and we're not given any of their names, okay? And it's very interesting because pharaohs put their name on everything. They carved it into everything they built and they made sure that their name lasted for all eternity, because they believed that once your name died, you could no longer exist in the afterlife, okay?
Well,
So that's why they put it on stone, right? So here we are, all these thousands of years later, we're still debating who they are, but we have our best guess. Now, if you're squeamish, don't look at this piece of paper. When it gets passed around to you, just flip it over. We have the mummies on this piece of paper of who we believe these pharaohs are. So it's actually a line of them that I'm going to pass around. So the first guy up at the top, his name is Thutmose the first. Then he has a son named Thutmose the second. He has this son. Y'all want to guess his name?
Thutmose the
Thutmose the third. And then he has a son. He has a Thutmose the third, but he doesn't become pharaoh. He has Amenhotep the second. Okay. So I'm going to pass this around. What is at the top is a genealogy of the pharaohs, and Moses overlaid over it, and then the actual pictures of the mummies of these pharaohs. So we still have these people today. Okay.
would you like me to go make copies?
I'm going to
Good
put it in
making
our
copies.
group too, so
Okay,
that you can
yeah,
see it in
yeah.
the group better, but this is going to kind of show you a little bit bigger picture. And we're going to pass this around a couple of times because we're going to talk about these people. Okay, so Thutmose the first, he was a strong military leader. He was very aggressive in expanding Egypt's borders, okay? He was deeply concerned with national security. He has commissioned massive construction projects that required huge labor forces, okay?
This man was.
The first one up at the top. That was the first.
Okay.
Yep. He also had a real reason to be nervous during his reign. The Hittites, who were at the north of him, they were becoming a significant military threat. They were gathering an army with the means of coming up against Egypt, okay? And a population of 2 million outsiders in your borders is going to cause you a lot of concern if you know that an army from the north is gathering. If the 2 million people inside your borders are going to join with them, guess what? You're going to lose that war. Okay? So he had reason to be very, very nervous during his reign. He literally believed that Israel was a ticking time bomb inside his borders. Okay? So he did what most insecure people do. Okay? He started to oppress what he feared. He started to oppress these people, the Israelites. Turned them into slaves and made them build storehouses. Now, how many people have heard that the Israelites built the pyramids? Okay, that's false. The pyramids had actually been there for 1,000 years by the time Israel got there. So they were actually ancient things by the time Israel showed up.
So who built the pyramids?
Long before then. Egyptians.
Egyptians.
Long before them. 1,000 years before they got there.
Okay.
Yep. So they built storehouses. They literally built cities where they would have a complex system of storage. And that way when they needed food during famines and things like that, the people would come into the cities and they would get food. So that's what they were actually building, was cities and storehouses. Okay? So it's worth noting of why God allowed the Israelites to end up in Egypt in the first place. If they had stayed in Canaan, okay, they would have been surrounded by multiple pagan nations. Okay? And they were deeply entrenched religious practices that included idol worship and intermarriage. Okay? So if they had intermarried with all of those different Canaanite peoples, within a couple of generations, they would no longer be Israel. Okay? So, God takes them to the one nation on the planet that believes so deeply in racial and cultural separation with other nations, they do not permit interracial marriages. So an Egyptian could not marry outside of their race, including the Israelites. So Israel gets to stay Israel inside of Egypt, the only nation that has those laws. Okay?
Like 2 to 3 billion people, because
2 million people, yeah.
that's how many 70 turned into.
Yeah, without marrying any Egyptians. Yeah,
But remember, the Egyptians were the same way.
yeah, I mean, they're multiplying and, things like that, but they're also only being allowed to marry Egyptians. They didn't have to marry within their family, but they could marry other Egyptians. So they stayed distinctly Israel for all those hundreds of years. Okay? This was not an accident. God planned all of this. That's why he took them to Egypt. Okay? And here's the irony. The harder Pharaoh pushed, the more Israel grew. Okay? In verse 12 it says, the more they were oppressed, the more they multiplied, and the more they spread out. Okay? So Pharaoh's strategy is backfiring spectacularly on him. Okay? The more he tries to push these people down, the more they're growing and multiplying. Okay? So we see this pattern a lot in Scripture. God is using oppression to accomplish his purpose. Okay? Alright. So verse 15. Then the king of Egypt said to the Hebrew midwives, one whose name is Siphrah and the other Puah. When you serve midwives to the Hebrew women and see them on the birth stool, if it is a son, you shall kill it. But if it is a daughter, she shall live. But the midwives feared God and did not do as the king of Egypt commanded them, and they let the male children live. So the king of Egypt called the midwives and said to them, why have you done this, and let the male children live? The midwives said to Pharaoh, because the Hebrew women are not like the Egyptian women, for they are vigorous and give birth before the midwife comes to them. So God dealt well with the midwives, and the people multiplied and grew very strong. And because the midwives feared God, he gave them families. Then Pharaoh commanded all his people, every son that is born to the Hebrews you shall cast into the Nile, but you shall let every daughter live. So, when the slave labor strategy didn't work, Pharaoh pivots to another strategy. Okay? We'll just call in these midwives and we'll have them kill all the boys. So if a woman has a boy, the direct order is kill it. Kill the boys. Let the daughters live. Okay? This was not just a cruel policy, this was a deliberate strike on the population. Because if you do not have boys, you can kill a population within only a generation. Okay? No men, no soldiers, no Messiah. Okay? That's who they were waiting for. Now, Pharaoh didn't know that last part. Okay? But the enemy behind his thought did. If we kill all of the boys, we cannot have a Messiah.
In my Bible that I wrote, that the midwives were more afraid of God than they were of Pharaoh.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's
And we're going to talk a lot about this. Pharaoh was the people's God. He was one of their gods. And they feared their God above him. Okay? So we're definitely going to talk about that. So they're out there serving these two women, and it was most certainly they were not the only midwives who were serving 2 million people. Okay? These were probably guild leaders. So they would have then given the edict down, because Pharaoh's not going to call every single midwife into his palace. He's going to call the leaders and expect for them to tell the followers what to do. Okay, so that was his plan. But they did choose to fear God above Pharaoh. And disobeying Pharaoh could have meant their execution. Because he calls them back in and he knows what they've been doing. And yet he doesn't execute them, which he had every right to, because they disobeyed a direct order from Pharaoh. But he doesn't. He just wants an explanation. Why aren't you doing what I asked you to? So they give him one. What's their explanation?
They have the babies before we get there.
What are you talking about? The baby's already born by the time we get there. We can't kill it. You told us that when it's born, we can kill it. but we can't just go around murdering innocent babies after they're born, right? We don't want us to do that. Okay, so that's their reasoning here. Okay, they
So
knew.
finding loopholes started way
Way
back.
We find some loopholes in the wall here. So they knew that killing innocents
Ever documented.
were wrong.
Right.
They weren't going to do that. Okay? They weren't going to kill it. And their answer is the Hebrew women are vigorous or lively. They're strong. These women, we just come by and they've already had their baby and they're back to work and they're
At the same
making
time,
us
they
dinner.
also called the Egyptian women weak.
Basically, yes. Yeah. They're saying by comparison, you know, the Egyptians who call us, they need our help. They need us to hold their hand. You know, they need us to be there. Meanwhile, the Hebrew women are just out here producing and they don't need any help. Okay? So, was that probably the whole truth?
No.
No, because if it were true, they wouldn't need midwives to begin with. Okay. So it's probably not the whole truth. It was probably a partial truth. Okay. They're getting around the edict probably by choosing to delay in coming. So either the women who were now giving birth, if you knew that if somebody showed up to attend your birth was going to kill your baby if it was a boy, would you call that person?
No.
Probably not. You would try to give as much possibility as you could to deliver it yourself or deliver it with people in your family. The midwives
But
could
it seems
also,
like even if they were there helping, they just lied about it.
yeah, they probably either took their time or even when they were there, they did what they needed to do. They went on their way. They knew
It's not
killing
like you
was
can
wrong.
see what they're doing.
Right. Because imagine that population spike. You're having a lot of babies. Okay? You can't keep track of everybody. They didn't have birth records. They weren't doing that sort of thing. Okay? They're not taking census, things like that. So what's interesting is that God does not condemn them for this kind of creative truth-telling here. This partial truth-telling. He actually has a response to them.
He awards them.
He awards them. He gives them families. And we think, well, of course he has to give them families because where do you get the 2 million people from, right? But a midwife at that time is actually, most of the time, a woman who could not give birth on her own. So if you could not give birth, you then became a midwife and you helped other women give birth because you didn't have a baby at home waiting for you. You could just leave at all hours of the night and take care of someone else. So when God says that he gave them families, the implication there is that God opened their wombs to have their own family.
That's what when I read it, that's kind of nice.
Yeah. So he blesses them with their own children as a reward for protecting these other children and their women. Okay? So, meanwhile, Pharaoh is not pleased about this. He's not happy. So we've got another edict. He's like, all right, I can't trust these midwives, so I'm going to put out a public edict. I'm not just going to do this in private anymore. Because, you know, if a midwife is taking care of a baby and oops, the baby accidentally dies, you know, what is that? Now we're going to have a public edict. And the public edict was to the Egyptians. If a Hebrew has a baby and it's a boy, you are to steal that baby and go throw it in the Nile.
Oh my goodness.
That was the edict to the Egyptians. So could you imagine the Hebrew women now live in fear of their neighbors? Because if you had your child, your neighbor Egyptian could come in and take your baby and go throw it in the Nile. And it's not going to survive. It's going to drown, it's going to get eaten. It's not going to survive. There's no chance of survival in the Nile. Okay? So now you live in fear of your neighbor. And that's exactly what Pharaoh wanted. He wanted them to fear the Egyptians. Okay? Israel is going to cry out over this because this is what then begins to happen. Is now
Jacob, Israel?
the nation of Israel,
Okay.
the Israelites. They're going to cry out, and God is going to hear their cries, okay? Because they don't know what to do.
Is that coming in
They're
chapter
trying.
2?
Yes.
Okay.
So
What if
these
the
two,
neighbors don't know it's a boy? What if we tell them it's, I mean, listen, I get it.
yeah, they're
But
gonna go
like-
check.
Oh.
Yeah, it's really easy to tell a boy and a girl, even at newborn
I mean,
stage.
it is, but like,
People wrapped in a blanket,
But
nobody
like-
can see.
Boy! No, they would go and.
Yeah, they don't have blue and pink blankets.
Right.
Yeah, we're not going to the gender
And then-
reveal
So
party.
then
And it's
a neighbor's gonna come knock on my door, let me see what your baby
Well,
is.
no, but the
Take your baby, check.
Remember,
Okay,
they
we're
were
all
slaves
slaves
to
at that time.
Egyptians.
They're slaves.
They they couldn't tell them, no, you can't do that.
That's right.
Didn't they go like door to door and like start checking?
That's in the New Testament.
That's something.
Yeah. That's when Jesus was born. But that's an echo of all of this that's going on. So you kind of see that building block, and then you get to that, and every Israelite would go, oh, we've been here before.
Yeah, okay.
So that's a shadow. This is a kind of a shadow of what's coming. But they would just go into your home, rip your baby out of your arms, check and see what it is, and take it from you. So there was no safety. There was no like locking the doors. There was no going against it. This is what Pharaoh wanted. He wanted the Israelites to be afraid of the Egyptians, okay? Because then you stay down if you're afraid. You don't speak up.
And quit fooling around because you don't know how to baby and how to take it.
Yeah. But what happens is this plan backfires too. They just keep having more kids. God just keeps on blessing them, and their population continues to explode, okay? So these two
Meanwhile, are they
midwives,
still taking babies and throwing them in the river?
they try. There's this, the thing is that we don't know exactly what happened, we're not told, but some of our best guesses is that they probably hid babies, they probably, did all of these different things to try to protect them as much as possible, because remember,
Like
we
hide
were
their
killed.
pregnancy, things
Hide their
like that.
pregnancies, hide when the babies are born,
Yeah.
say the baby was stillborn,
Okay.
there's all these things going on to try to protect these babies.
Is this like, is this their story, like they put the baby in a basket and said,
We're gonna get
That's
there.
what the.
In the basket,
Got it.
yeah, we're gonna get there.
Got it. Okay.
We're only on chapter 1.
Got it.
We're gonna talk about a very specific baby boy
In a basket.
in a
down the
basket
aisle.
in the Nile.
Okay.
Okay, so we have these two midwives. They risk everything. Everything. They risk their own necks, but they do it quietly in simple acts of courage. And their names are recorded in scripture. We have the names of these two women. Whose names do we not have in this chapter?
The Egyptian.
The pharaohs, the king.
Pharaoh's, the king. The person who sculpts his name on every single stone he can find. And yet, we have two midwives. Two little lowly Hebrew midwives. We have their names recorded in scripture that has been recorded for all time. Who gets the legacy?
The midwives.
Why?
Because they
obeyed God.
They followed God.
They obeyed God. They obeyed God. Okay. It's simple as that. Their legacy stood because they obeyed God. Okay.
They feared him.
They feared him, they obeyed him, and that obedience mattered. And yet the most powerful man in the room, we don't even know his name. We have our best guess that is Thutmose the First. That's our best guess. We could be wrong. Okay? And his name is still carved in monuments in Egypt. And yet, God is pointing the legacy and the spotlight right on these two women here. Okay? So, what does this story about these two women and their faithfulness help us as women who sometimes feel invisible and insignificant and like we don't matter because we're not the most powerful person in the room? Why does it matter that God recorded this story for women like us?
They obeyed. They followed.
What was the most important part of the whole story?
Protecting those children.
Protecting the children, obeying God above all else. Doesn't matter whether the spotlight's on you or not. Because the spotlight was on Pharaoh and all of his decisions, and you see his calculated decision get worse and worse and worse and worse. He made them slaves. He called in the midwives to take care of his bloody business. He could have just sent soldiers. He doesn't. He's using fear as manipulation here. And then he has the people take care of his business. So who's the coward in all of this? Pharaoh. But he's the most important person in the room. He's a god to them. Not playing, y'all. He is a god to them. Okay? But he's the one who is weak in this position. So how can we reframe our thinking? Because that's part of the whole part of Exodus is to reframe your thinking. What is quiet, costly obedience in light of power, in light of those big decisions, those political decisions that are being made in the room? Okay? So I want you to sit with that. What matters more? Okay? The decisions that Pharaoh made, the decisions that the midwives made, the decisions that those Hebrew women made. The decisions that the Egyptians then had to make.
Well, you said what is quiet, costly, what?
Obedience.
Disobedience.
I have a question,
Mhm.
sort of stepping a little into chapter 2,
Mhm.
but does the decision of the midwives for this disobedience, like, does it inspire the Israeli women?
Yes.
Like, would,
We know it at
if
least
they-
inspires one.
yeah, but like, if they hadn't, would there possibly have been less that were like, maybe we have to follow?
Absolutely. Because they're following their example and they're seeing God bless them. So it's going to be easier for you to make that decision when your leadership, when the people who are caring for you step up and do the right thing, even in the quiet. You know, because their decision was made that moment that baby came out and they saw whether it was a boy or girl. Because they're not killing babies in the womb. They don't know if it's boy or girl. And Pharaoh is distinguishing them. We're not killing an entire population because that would be wrong. People would rise up. We're just taking care of the boys. We'll let the girls live. But what are we going to do with the girls because we can't intermarry with them? So what are they going to do?
Sell them.
They're going to become slaves. They're going to become property. They're going to serve us in our house because we're not going to intermarry with them. We're going to sell them off. We're going to make them slaves. We're going to make them servants. So he's literally trying to make this plan of if we get rid of all the boys, then we don't have this population explosion. We don't have soldiers who can go to war with our enemies. And we have a bunch of women who are now in a position where they have to depend on us.
Would they have used them, when you say slaves, would they have also been part of a harem or no?
No.
So they would
They did not believe, they literally believed a different race was a different creature altogether. It was
No.
incredibly racist.
That's what I mean, so I
Yes.
did wanna, cause I was like, eventually you could, and then if a child was born and they were like, look what you did to our people, and they could
Absolutely
rise
not.
up that way.
They would have murdered the children from an interracial marriage. They did not believe in that at all. Egypt was the only country at that time who did not believe in intermarriage at all. And that's why I was
Potiphar's wife went after Joseph because they didn't know he was an Israelite.
she did not know what he was. Potiphar knew what he was, but she probably didn't. But she's
Sorry,
also,
I'm going backwards.
yeah.
Hold on, Potiphar's wife is the one that wanted
in
to sleep with
Genesis.
Joseph?
Yes.
Okay.
But remember, she's just seeing him as property.
Right.
So I'm just here for a good time. She's, this is not marriage, this is not procreation, I'm just here for the good time.
Yeah, but if she
Because
were,
really, he's really handsome.
yeah, but if she were to get pregnant from inappropriate relations, what would have, I mean, they would
That would
have,
have caused a huge issue. And you see that in the story. We have a huge issue. He goes to jail over his mistress wanting him
For years.
for years. He just gets dumped in a pit. That's how extreme the racism
Joseph
is.
does?
Yeah.
right, but I just, like, why was she,
Because he was handsome. Y'all,
He was good.
he was something to look at.
it was worth the,
To her, it was worth it.
okay.
Yeah, she's condemned for that decision, big time.
And her
Yeah,
husband
the
may have been
Israelites would
older
have been
too.
sexual slaves.
No. Absolutely not. They would have literally believed that they were lesser than, that they were dogs,
Animals.
slaves, animals. Yeah, that's why they're also living out in Goshen, because that's
And the
outside
shepherds
property.
were.
They were shepherds, they were dirty, they're outside of us. Yep. Alright, so these two women, they don't have a platform, they don't give a speech, okay? They don't organize a movement, they just refuse to do the wrong thing when it was asked of them. And God believes that they are so significant that He writes their names down for all eternity. Okay, so this week I want you to think of those places where you are being asked by culture, by pressure, by convenience to maybe do something that you know is not right. Okay, it doesn't have to be murder, it doesn't have to be that extreme. But we're all pressured to do things that we know we're not supposed to do. So I want you to sit with those places. What would it look like to have quiet obedience? Even if nobody ever knew that that was the thing that you were struggling or saying no against. If no one ever knows, are you going to say no? Okay? Are you going to say no? So look to these two women who feared God, who did the right thing, and they let God worry about their legacy. Okay? As opposed to Pharaoh, who was trying to claw his way for his own legacy. And we're going to see that in the rest of Exodus.
Brittany, I would like to know who the